All right, everybody, here we go. This is the original Friday night vibe. I'm T Cash. This is hip hop, health, and healing from the Northern California perspective. 89.5 FM, KPOO, the soul of San Francisco, KPOO.com. This is also if you are looking at us online across all platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, other outlets as well. Today's segment is, along with the segment about fatherhood, something near and dear to me. And just like that segment about fatherhood, I'm hoping that this can translate into your life in a way that is impactful and positive. And one thing that we do here in Northern California, especially as far as, us as artists, or part of the artist community, is that, we bleed on paper. We bleed in that studio. We let it out. We feel our feelings. But some raps don't rhyme, and there are times where we just have to communicate and express how we feel the way we do it. Some people might do it online, social media. Some people just, and just, I don't know. It might be in other areas, maybe a mural, or it just might be a song. But the idea is we need to just be able to feel and grieve. And that's probably, the basis for a lot of why, healing is an element of the original Friday Night Vibe now, because we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot of grief, a lot of pain. We've lost a lot of Bay Area hip hop artists, too many to name at this point, right? And it's from that perspective, as well as my own non-hip hop related perspective, that this segment came about. The title, as you've probably seen online, and if you haven't seen it online, you're listening online through KPOO or KPOO.com, is Grieving the Loss of a Toxic Family Member. Grieving the loss of a toxic family member. All right. When I say loss, I mean death. When I say death, I mean like that is it. Physically, they are no longer with us on this plane of existence that we're in now. All right. And I have multiple family members that have passed on. I'm almost positive that somebody listening probably can relate to that. But the difference between like having multiple family members that passed on and this segment and what we're talking about is that we're talking about grieving toxic family members that have passed on, right? That could be very, very difficult for a lot of different reasons. Let's unpack this. This might call for a second round, third round of segments. And that's okay. But just for today, let's unpack this. Let's try to do as much as we can. And we'll come back to it if need be. I'm probably sure we will. But even in the event that we do, let's just make the most out of this time together. And then we'll call it a day. All right. All right. So I remember about 5 years ago when I got the call from my mom that a family member who has been definitely impacted by substance abuse, definitely been impacted by trauma, both known to us and the trauma that they may not have shared, had passed away after years and years of just struggle. Okay. And that struggle involved the struggle against myself, my mother, other family members, but also the struggle within their own interpersonal relationship with themselves. And I could not sit here and lie and say that drugs didn't have as much to do with it as other things. Drugs had everything, if not the thing, to do with physically why their body eventually gave out. I was very numb that day. And where I'm going with this after this numbness wore off is hopefully where a lot of us can relate. Us who have been impacted by toxic family members passing on, grieving, and then the ripple effect that happens in the community around us as we grieve. When this family member passed on, I remember feeling numb. And then I felt really, really, really angry. And I felt really, really jealous and envious. Why? Because people say, man, that's kind of cold, bro. What? Here's where I'm going with that. If you have lived at any point in time as somebody who is, as far as people can tell, and definitely you could attest for, positive, healthy, sober, productive, responsible, accountable, if you have lived that life in the shadows of someone who has not, and their family, and the word family has been, excuse me, and the word family has been unfortunately exploited to dismiss some of the concerns that you may have had with being who you are and living in the shadow of who that person was. If you haven't gone through that, it won't make sense as to why myself or you, the listener who can empathize with that, would feel like that after the person is no longer here with us, right? But that's how I felt. I felt angry because now it's time to give this person more attention. And not only did I feel angry about that, I felt angry about being angry. You can feel angry about being angry, okay? I felt jealous. I felt sad. I felt hopeless. And people say, well, what the hell? Why hopeless? I felt hopeless because if you have been down this road, and this is really specifically for you, if you've been down that road of being the for all intents and purposes, non-toxic family member, and you've lived in the shadow of the toxic family member, if you've been down that road, they've passed on, you've felt angry and sad and envious, you start to feel hopeless because during their time on this earth with us, there was this hope that one day they would get their stuff together and there would be no shadow because there'd be nothing to talk about. So the focus wouldn't be on them. They'd be sober or non-toxic or whoever they needed to be, and it's all good. But when they pass on, not only did they pass on and the focus is back on them in the bereavement process, the planning of the funeral and how do we mourn, but that is going to be a cemented legacy for a lot of people who will come up to you, the responsible one, the accountable one, the one who did not make the mistakes, and say, oh my goodness, do you remember this person? Let's open this up and let's talk about this and let's stay in this shadow some more. That sounds really vain and impersonal and cold and disrespectful to the dead for someone who has not dealt with the dead in the manner that I'm talking about. But if you have, then there is sense in what I'm saying. And it's with that I'm going to stop and I'm going to pivot to ways that you can actively and productively grieve the loss of a toxic family member. Number one, find a safe space. Find a safe space. The space can be a person. The space can be a group of people. The space can be an actual space. Like I just need to not be around certain people, right? It could be like space with people or space without people. But the key word here is not just like space, safe space. And before you find that safe space, I want you to try to define what you need in order to be safe in the moment, not just feel safe. You can feel safe and not be safe, right? That's probably half of toxicity right there for a lot of us. It feels good to us, but it wasn't good for us. And that is what we call a toxin, essentially. But find a safe space. Find people who you can confide in that will not judge you, that will give you proper feedback, that will give you critical feedback without any vilification. Find that place. If you cannot find that place in the form of a person or a physical location, try to bring it to you in the form of a book, in the form of a segment, a podcast, in the form of a website, reading online between our phones and our computer screens, just Googling something like this: grieving the loss of a toxic family member, grieving the loss of an addict, of an abuser, of somebody who just, they were who they were. And the family member that I'm talking about, for me, they weren't an abuser of me. Like, they didn't abuse me or nothing like that, but they were toxic. There was no denying that. Ironically, that person and myself had a great relationship before they passed away. But the reality is, they were still toxic, and everything that I spoke of earlier comes into play. So first things first, find a safe space. Immediately stick with that safe space. Second thing is, and this is a little tricky. Do your best to talk how you feel immediately with anyone who might project anything about that lost toxic loved one that triggers you in the context that I'm speaking on when it comes to being in the shadow of that person. Here's an example of that. And I will go on record and say this was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but I did it and I have no regrets. And it made me and my father even closer than we are now. Okay, so the toxic family member passed away. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of agony. I talked to my father. My father says, "I'm sorry to hear that." I start to cry. I'm crying, right? He says, "Oh, it's okay, man. You don't have to cry. Don't cry. You gotta be strong." Stop right there. If you know the backstory or part of it, you know from my previous segment about fatherhood, my father was gone out the house by the time I was 11 years old. So in the heat of that moment, when he told me that, I said exactly how I felt. And I didn't yell or scream, but I just let him know, "Hey, man, I've been trying to be strong ever since you left. And at that moment, there was a huge release. I'm not saying that you need to say that specifically if your dad went through, but what I'm saying is talk how you feel. Why? Because number one, feeling your feelings in this mass grievance moment, nobody's going to be surprised. But feeling your feelings and communicating them to people who you may or may not have communicated them to out of concern for anything that's been going on up until this point, it might be the perfect time for you to say, "Hey, you know what? This person isn't even here anymore. All bets are off. If there's any legitimate time and place for me to respectfully vent and advocate for myself, just for a microsecond of time, it would be now." So number two, talk how you feel in the moment. If you're triggered by that, we call shadowism that I spoke of a few minutes ago. You know what I mean? Number three, and I think we'll conclude with this. We don't want to go too well, maybe two more, and then we'll be done. This is a tough one. Is feel how you're going to feel and nothing else. What am I saying? What am I saying by that? What do I mean by that, y'all? If you are angry the whole way through, if you are sad the whole way through, or you are not, that is your feeling to feel. Those are your feelings to feel. So another way of saying this is, don't assume the feelings that are projected onto you by other family members if that's the case. And when I say if that's the case, I guess what I'm really trying to say is if it's expected that there's this uniformity in grieving this person. Oh, they were such a good person, but they just made a lot of mistakes. You may not feel like that, and that's okay. Oh, damn it, I told them not to blah, 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 blah. You may not feel like that, and that's okay. Well, sometimes we don't know what we're doing, and that you may not feel like that. And that is okay. Why? Because this is not about grieving the loss of a loved one. The end. Friday Night Vibe. Peace out. See you later. This is about grieving the loss of a toxic loved one, of a toxic family member. So what I'm speaking to is number four, honor the toxicity. Honor the toxicity. That sounds really strange, but it's the best piece of advice I developed over time and that I could give you if you are actively grieving the loss of a toxic family member. What the hell does honor the toxicity mean? Just keep it real with yourself when everybody else around you might start to be in a state of denial, and they might gaslight themselves, and they might try to gaslight you. And the only thing that I could use as an example is my own family member's physical reality that played a part in what was going on to contribute to how they transitioned physically, how they died. I had a family member come up to me the other day and say, you know, sometimes I think about what if I did something different? And the only thing that I could think about is you did, but it's still on that person to do what it is that we needed them to do, which was different. And God bless their soul. If you don't believe in God, may the creator of the universe, however you define that, bless whoever you deem them to be after they transition. But they contributed to a certain degree to their demise through the actions that they took. And that might sound like it's coming from a place of apathy. Excuse the long pause. I wanted to find the right word, but it's really not. It's about us who identify as the non-toxic ones, or at least the ones who didn't make the same mistakes. That's for us to hold on to and say, yeah, but everybody else around us can deny that. I won't deny that. So that's what I mean by honor the toxicity. All right. Listen, this could go on forever and ever. I'm not going to do that. This is probably one of the heaviest segments on the Friday Night Vibe. This is also with total respect to anyone and everyone who has passed on, who might have been labeled toxic by their family and friends. And it's definitely out of total respect to you. If you are the main one grieving the loss of a toxic family member, we have a lot more to talk about when it comes to healing. But as you probably can tell, I don't want to do anything corny, right? The Friday Night Vibe has never been that, and we cannot do that now. Also, bonus, we want to toggle this back over to losing some of our most dear and near Bay Area, Northern California hip hop artists, because as much as they made good music, as much as they, definitely made an impression on me over the years, we really don't know what was going on behind the scenes. And they may have had something about their situation that contributed to their demise. And we have to honor that and respect that. And lastly, and I want to make sure that this ends properly. Lastly, we still at the end of the day have an obligation to respect the dead. So none of this that I'm talking about is a call to action to just be disrespectful to the dead. They are gone now, and we do not know whether we believe in a life after this or not. What is the next step for them, physically or non-physically? We don't know that. We don't know that. All right. I really hope this has been helpful. This has been the original Friday Night Vibe, hip hop, health, healing from the Northern California perspective. I'm T Cash, 89.5 FM. KPOO, the soul of San Francisco. Rap Snacks Radio, KPOO.com. Until next time, party people, that's it. Later.